Hi, have you ever asked yourself why we have different positions for the piano lid and what they change? Of course, the answer is not a simple one and it depends. And that's what I'm going to show you in this video. Let's start with the completely closed position. So the lid of the grand piano is completely closed and it's possible to put the music stand on top of it. Some of the music stands have little patches of felt underneath so that they don't scratch the lid. You can easily put them on top. And this is a very good position for practicing. In fact, what it changes is that a lot of the sound emerges from the soundboard from underneath the piano, and you have much less sound coming from the top. You will also notice that high frequencies and overtones of the piano are killed, and that overall there is less sound. The sound is less strong and less powerful. And this is a useful position for practicing. And I'm going to tell you why. I think it's one of the most underrated positions for practicing these days. But if you have a look at videos of famous pianists, you will see that some of them used this position at their homes or when they were practicing themselves. For example, Sviatoslav Richter or also contemporary pianists like Emanuel Ax use this position at home or when they're practicing. This position helps you to develop a powerful and strong sound. As I said, many of the overtones and generally a lot of the sound of the piano is killed. So if you practice in this position, you have to really focus on playing in a way that brings out your power, your forte, your brilliance, your overtones in your playing, the high frequencies. And this helps you a lot to develop these skills and to strengthen these skills if you practice like this. Also, if you practice with an open lid or with a completely open lid in your home, this might not be suitable. It might give you a false impression of your power in playing, of the amount of sound that you can produce, because a grand piano with a completely open lid in your home will sound very loud, it will sound very powerful, even though you probably don't play powerfully. So it gives you a false impression of your strength, of your power, and of the richness of your play, that when you later go to a stage or when you play in a bigger hall, your sound will sound small. In order to prevent this, it is a good idea to practice at least every now and then with a completely closed lid in your home. Of course, there are also drawbacks to this position. One of the drawbacks is that ergonomically this is quite a bad position. You see that the music stands on top. So if you're reading music, if you don't play by heart, it will cause you to always have to kind of look up to your music, and this position is not a natural position. The music stand is too high, and especially if there's kids playing on the grand piano, I really don't recommend using this position because the music stand is not in a good position for kids. It's far too high up. Of course, also from an aesthetic point of view, the sound is not so nice in this position, but as I have explained before, I think it's a good position for practicing. Of course, if you play by heart, you can also take away the music stand or put it inside. That's certainly a good thing to do. It's better than to use it with the music stand. But now let's go to the other positions and let's open the lid. So the first step of opening is to just fold back this first part of the lid, like this. And this position is actually also a very good position for practicing. You will see that often, this position often in conservatories or music schools where the pianos are left like this the whole time. Every student that comes plays in this position. It's a position that gives you quite a natural feeling of the sound. The sound, of course, now mainly emerges from this bit that is open. I mean, underneath here are the hammers that touch the strings. So you really hear a much more direct sound than with a closed lid. And the sound is rich in overtones, a little bit similar to what you hear when the lid is completely open, but there's less resonance and there's less sound. So if you're in a smaller room, if you're in an apartment, for example, this might be a good position. The overall sound is somewhat reduced, the overall volume of the sound and of the resonance is somewhat reduced, but you still get a very natural picture of the sound. Yeah, what else can I say? You can practice like this either with or without the music stand. If you have the music stand in, it will be a little bit of a barrier between you and the sound, because the board is in front of your face and in front of your ears, blocking the direct view or the direct contact with the sound that's happening behind it. So if you play by heart anyway, I would recommend you either take out the music stand or you fold it down so that there is a more direct connection between you and the music that you play. The next position is a little bit dependent on your piano model. Some piano models have one position for opening the lid, some have two and some have three. My piano has three different positions. And the lowest position for the lid is, in my piano, this one. It has a special stand here that you can use for this. And this position is often advertised as the position that is used when you accompany classical songs, classical lieder. It's a position where there is, of course, a little bit more resonance coming out from this part of the piano. Sound is a bit more rich than when the lid is completely closed. It is a little bit nicer, but it is still not a very focused sound, let's say. So it leaves a lot of room for the singer or for other instruments to play over it, to play with it. I don't know personally if it's really the best position for accompanying lieder, because this really depends a lot on your instrument, on the condition of the hammers in your instrument, on the room, on the person you play with, on the singer. And I think it can be a good position for concerts where you perform or accompany songs, but it's not necessarily the best one. You have to figure this out yourself in the acoustics of the room with the person you are playing with and with your piano. The next position is what I call the semi-open position, which is this one here. Let me see, yeah, that's this one here. Generally considered a good position for chamber music. You can also use it for practicing at home if you want more sound every now and then. I wouldn't use it all the time at home, but especially, for example, if you have a larger room, if you practice with others, if you do chamber music, this might be a nice position, and it's the same position that you can also use in your concert when you play chamber music. Usually people you play with like it better in the concert if, as a pianist, you have the lid only semi-open compared to fully open, because they think that it gives them more room. So subjectively they have more room, they don't have to play so loudly, they don't have to play forcefully. They usually like this position a lot. It's not necessarily the best position, as I have said before. I mean, it is totally possible in the right room with the right piano to play a wonderful chamber music concert with a fully open lid. And that really depends. But as you know, a lot that has to do with the piano is also about perception, visual perception also. And the piano, the grand piano, is a really big and powerful instrument. And if you play with others, for example, with strings or with singers, they're often a little bit afraid that they will be overwhelmed by this massive power of sound that we have in our modern instruments. So also visually and subjectively, the semi-open lid will give them a bit more freedom to express themselves. That's why they often like it. The last position is the position that you see most in solistic or solo concerts, which is the fully open position of the lid. When you open the lid, you should be careful that the angle between the lid and the stand is always a right angle. So make sure to use the right hole for the right position. So for the fully open position, I use this hole. Then with the smaller stand, I use this hole. And in the first position that I showed you for accompanying leader, I use the smallest stand and I use this hole so that we always have the right angle. This is important for the distribution of the weight, because especially in big grand pianos, the lid is really heavy. And it's important to have this right angle here so that you have the right support, otherwise there could be problems. Of course, as I said, this is the position that you see most in concerts. It's the position where the sound emerges in a very particular way. So you have direct sound emerging from this bit of the piano that is characterized by the attack of the hammers, so the direct attacking sound of the hammers. But then you have a lot of resonance coming from that bit of the piano. And this resonance comes either from the strings, from the soundboard, and it is reflected in a very nice way by the angle of the lid. So if you imagine that the audience is sitting there, the angle of this lid is really focusing the sound towards the audience, or let's say the resonance bit of the sound. So we will have a really nice mixture of direct attacking sounds and resonating sounds. If you play with the open lid, it's for sure the most focused, the richest, and also the most powerful way that your piano can sound. I would totally recommend this for concerts, as I have said, but not necessarily for practicing at home. I've talked about this before. I think it can give you a false impression, a wrong impression of power, and it's not the way I would practice every day. But sometimes you need to work on very fine details in your sound. If you are, for example, working on Mozart and you want to really shape different colors of sound, and you want to be able to hear and work on slightest nuances in your sound, you will need this position of the lid. So every now and then I suggest opening it like this, even for practice at your home, because this will allow you to work with overtones, to hear what's going on, and to really shape the colors in your playing. But don't practice like this every day, unless you have a nice concert hall at home for practicing. Then it's of course totally suitable. Then there is one more position that I'm not going to show you, and this last position is when you completely remove the lid. As you can see, the lid has hinges there at the back, and in these hinges there's little bolts, and these bolts can be taken out. Then you can completely remove the lid. You can try that once. If you try this, you should have a second person helping you, because the lids are very heavy. and you don't want any scratches or accidents with taking off the lid. If you take the lid off, this has several consequences. Of course, I mean, the sound that emerges from the piano really spreads everywhere in every direction. It will not be focused, as it is the case with the lid. It will just go everywhere in every possible direction. This you might see sometimes in concerts or in recordings. For example, if the piano is in the middle of an orchestra, if it is an orchestral piano, or let's say if there are several pianos where you need contact with each other, where you need to see each other, the lid will be in the way, so you have to remove it. The sound will also mix very well with other instruments. As I said, if you have an orchestra all around you, for example, if you play contemporary music with instruments all around you, the kind of 360 degrees feeling is really what you get when you remove the lid. And also then if you do recordings with overhead microphones, that should really kind of capture the 360 degrees scene and what's going on. This might be an idea to consider. In order to illustrate what I have just told you about the different positions of the lid, I have recorded sound examples for you. I've recorded the sine passage with every position of the lid and with exactly the same microphones in the same place and with the same settings, so you can really hear the differences in sound that the different positions of the lid cause. Enjoy! Yeah, so I hope you found this helpful. There is no right and no wrong, of course. You should definitely try out all the different possibilities that the piano lid offers. I think there's a lot of exploration that you can do there. It will give you many insights as to how the piano works, as to how sound changes in different positions. This is interesting, and I think this can bring you forward on your way as an artist and as a music enthusiast. Enjoy!